Because right now we're losing good voices, not because they weren't passionate, but because passion alone doesn't pay the bills. So if you've ever felt like you're failing because you care about the money, let me say this clearly. You're not. You're just trying to create something meaningful without setting yourself on fire in the process. That's not selfish, that's smart, that's necessary, and that's honest. Let's stop pretending otherwise. Welcome to today's episode. I hope you guys enjoy. Like, sub, tell me what you think in the comments below, and remember that Patreon and YouTube memberships are available for exclusive content. Let's talk about this. Put your art out there. The beautiful lie that beckons indie writers. There's a piece of advice that echoes through creative spaces like a mantra. Just put your art out there. Create because you love it. The money doesn't matter. That sounds noble, encouraging, almost spiritual. And in theory, that's a beautiful idea, that creativity should be pure, free from the messy weight of money and expectations. That we should make things because we're driven to, because we care, because something inside us refuses to stay quiet. But for many indie writers, the idea doesn't hold up. Not for long. Because at some point, someone has to pay. And more often than not, it's the writer. In time, in energy, in actual hard-earned money. And when the return doesn't come, when the silence is louder than the response, it becomes harder and harder to keep pretending it's just enough to create. So, let's be real. Independent publishing isn't free. Not even close. Let's be brutally honest about what it takes to self-publish today, if you want to do it, air quotes, right. If you want your book to stand beside traditional published books in terms of quality, you're going to need to invest. Developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, anywhere from 500 to 2,000 plus depending on the length and depth. Cover designs. On average, 300 to 800, more if you want something from a well-known person, although you can get less, this is not a set rule. Interior formatting and typesetting, 100 to 400 pounds. ISBNs, website hosting, mailing lists, software licenses, they all add up, and marketing and advertising, as much as you can afford, but the floor is never zero. This is before you factor in time, which most writers is borrowed from work, family, rest, and sanity. This is also before you factor in burnout, doubt, and the emotional weight of constantly putting yourself out there and getting nothing back. So when people say, don't worry about the money, what they're really saying, often unintentionally, is just accept the risk. Just accept that you might lose thousands. That's not an underestimate. Get no response and feel like you threw your heart into a void. Do it anyway, smile through it. That's not encouragement, that's denial. And it's not greedy to care about the return. Here's the part that gets lost in the shuffle. Wanting return on your work doesn't make you greedy, it makes you human. Most of us aren't trying to get rich, we're just trying to break even. To feel like the hours and the cash and the exhaustion meant something. That someone read what we wrote and cared. That we aren't shouting into a void. It's not about selling out, it's about survival. The writers I talk to aren't giving up because they've lost the will to create, they're giving up because they can't afford to keep creating at a loss. They're tired, they've poured money in they didn't really have in the first place, and they believed in a dream, and the dream didn't return the favour. And yes, some people will say they just risked, it's just the risk of doing anything creative, but here's the catch. We never talk about how unsustainable that risk is for anyone who doesn't already have money, time, or support. There is a massive privilege gap in indie publishing, and we gloss over it with platitudes like passion and preservation. That's not the reality for most people. The publishing world, both traditional and indie, often feels like a contradiction. On one hand, we're told that books matter, that stories change lives, that everybody has a voice worth sharing. But then, when writers ask, how am I supposed to afford to tell these stories? They're told don't do it for the money. So what is it? Do books matter, or do they only matter if they come with a side of financial sacrifice? Here's the truth. Art is priceless, but making it cost something, and pretending it doesn't, pretending that we should all keep going no matter what, that needing money somehow taints your work isn't just naive, it's harmful. It shames people for walking away, when often they have no real choice. The illusion of just keep going is real. The idea that you just need to keep going until success finds you is easy to repeat when you're not the one shouldering the costs. It's the kind of advice that sounds wise in hindsight but is devastating in real time, because it implies that anyone who doesn't make it simply didn't try hard enough, didn't want it enough, didn't love their work enough. But I've seen brilliant writers who've given everything they had, financially and emotional, still fade into obscurity, not because they weren't good enough, but because they couldn't keep losing money and energy indefinitely. Because writing doesn't happen in a vacuum, it happens in a world where people need to work, eat, rest, and just function. And no, this isn't about blaming capitalism or arguing against ambition. It's about acknowledging the reality that creative work is hard, expensive, and often thankless. It's about making space for nuance, for truth, and for people who are quietly disappearing from the creative world, not for the lack of love, but from exhaustion, both physically, emotionally, and financially. So, what do we need to do? We don't need more encouragement, we need real talk. We need better funding models for indie creators. We need more transparency about what publishing actually costs, because it seems to be a very unpopular thing to talk about. And maybe we need to do the unpopular thing and talk about money. We need community driven platforms that make it easier to share resources and lift each other up, instead of review bombing each other over a kind of dreary take on over a review. And most of all, we need to stop shaming people for wanting their work to be sustainable. It is not a cardinal sin to want to make money, to promote your work, to make a living out of something. It's simple. Because right now we're losing voices, not because they weren't professional or passionate, but because the passion alone doesn't pay the bills. So, if you've ever felt like you're failing because you care about the money, let me say this clearly, you're not. You're just trying to create something meaningful without setting yourself on fire in the process. That's not selfish, that's smart, that's necessary, that's honest. Let's stop pretending otherwise.